Very good evening to everyone. And I think it's good that we are talking about communication because, like, whichever field we are in, whichever specialization we are in, uh, the, what we do may differ, but communication is something willy-nilly we are doing all the time, whether we are speaking, whether we are not speaking.
हाँ हाँ
I think one of the notice,
ठीक है हाँ आज हाँ
I'm sorry,
हाँ
no disturbance. Someone's mic is not muted. Hello.
Yeah, it's okay now. It's okay now. Carry on. Carry on.
Yeah. So my topic today is verbal and non-verbal communication with patients and caregivers, and there a lot of the things in my talk were also covered by Dr. Kapoor, as is quite natural that would happen because communication is such a wide umbrella, and the whole 01 course you will learn about different aspects of communication. And as I said, communication is something that one cannot avoid. So over the next half an hour or so, I'll just go over the what, why, how, when, where, and who of the verbal and non-verbal communication in healthcare. So, the word communication is from the Latin root is communicare, which means to share. So fundamentally, communication is an act of conveying meanings through the use of mutually understood signs and symbols. So fundamentally, it is a process which is not static. Communication is not something just one time it has happened. It is a dynamic process. It is happening all the time, and hopefully, it is at least two-way. I will talk about communication in general for a few slides before I come to the communication in healthcare because the fundamentals remain the same. So we want to convey meaning through signs and symbols, through a process which is mutual and at least bidirectional. There may be it may be multidirectional, but at least bidirectional. So if we see fundamentally what are the components of communication, so there is one messenger who is sending out an information or an input to a receiver or a recipient through some channel, which may be either oral or written in the form of some graphics or video or whatever. So which is, and in a certain coded way, but between the two, they share some understanding in the sense that there is some common code. For example, if I'm speaking in English and the patient doesn't understand English, then we don't have a common code, and irrespective of how well I put something, it is not going to be understood. So we should remember, and the messenger and the recipient, the roles keep on reversing while we are having the communication. Hopefully, that is how it should be. That once I am the sender, and at another moment I am the recipient, because only then effective communication can happen. Because it is not just the information that I am giving out, but also the input that I am receiving from, in this case, say I'll use the word patient because we are talking of communication in healthcare. So it would be good to remember this basic format of what communication is. We call it verbal when we use words. That means they may be spoken or written. And when we use language in the form of words, basically what is a language? Language is a system of symbols where we have mutually agreed meanings. I mean, water is water because all of us know the word water is associated with this drink, water. So we have mutually agreed meanings. See, when we say sign language, you must have seen people who cannot speak or who cannot hear. They use sign language, but that is also considered to be verbal because the vocabulary and the grammar and the structure of that sign language is still the same, and it can still have non-verbal elements. For example, somebody, in sign language also, by changing the speed, size, and intensity of the signs, you can show your anger or any other emotion. So there is a non-verbal element to sign language also. Now, when you say non-verbal, no words, does that mean that there is no communication? I think Dr. Kapoor also stressed it time and again, as did Dr. Amita, that it is non-linguistic. We are not using words, but we are all the time, see, two living beings, if you put them together, even if they don't speak, there will be communication. It cannot be helped. It is like that. Even if you do not touch, even if you don't utter a word, there will be still communication. Usually, when we say non-verbal communication, we refer to communication which happens through touch. We call it haptic communication, gestures and postures. I think if you don't consider it like some great scientific topic, all of us know what this means. We can say the very same words, but in a different way, with a different gesture, and it can mean a totally different thing. Even a child knows, when the mother is saying no, when the mother is saying no, they know what is the difference. Eye contact. See, you talk, I think Dr. Kapoor also stresses, you are talking to a patient and you're not looking at them, half the impact will be gone. Like with friends, with equals, we give this the thing of maintaining eye contact, but with patients, many times we forget. And the eye contact also can be of various degrees. There is a difference between maintaining eye contact and staring or glaring. Proximity. You must have seen sometimes, on the roadside, this is a very common thing. Somebody's car bumps into something or whatever. And when people come out to fight, you should see how close they come to each other, You try to intimidate. When you want to intimidate, you come very close. That is, on the other hand, sometimes you can come close as an expression of intimacy. So proximity, but how that space is maintained, whether it is with aggression or whether it is with gentleness, all these things are non-verbal ways in which human beings are, and even animals, actually, animals are actually more cued into this non-verbal communication. I'll give you a funny and small example. I take my dogs out for a walk in the evening, and they're tiny dogs, they're pugs, and sometimes a stray dog is coming from the other side, and my one of my pugs is very aggressive. And what I've seen is that even a bigger dog at the other end of the road simply just turns a tail between its legs and runs away, even before we have reached, because they have communicated non-verbally through body language. So non-verbal communication is extremely important. And I think all of us have to become aware of this, with a lot of things becoming digitalized. And, like today, for example, in fact, right at the beginning, I told Dr. Punita, I'm not yet comfortable with Zoom, because when I'm talking to, people are sitting in the room and I can see what the impact of what I'm saying is there. And I get feedback in terms of whether somebody is bored or whether someone has gone to sleep or someone is showing interest. It gives me the feedback where impromptu changes happen in the presentation, and the presentation evolves with this feedback, which is not available when we have a presentation like this. So it is not, however, I would like to say that even when we use words, there also we have non-verbal elements. It is not just the words that we use, but how we use those words. As the tone, the speed, the rhythm, the stress we give to a particular word. For example, Dr. Kapoor gave the this thing where the word only, if you shift from one place to another, the whole meaning changes. Similarly, in a sentence, the stress that you give to different words can change the very meaning. Similarly, like on ward rounds, sometimes you have people who speak very fast and you don't understand. So it is not just the words, but also the way that those words are there. So that becomes a non-verbal element of the verbal communication also. So basically, it is important to understand the non-verbal communication because the gesturing, the body language, the posturing can complement your verbal communication. Like Dr. Amita, when she said that you can just put your hand on the patient's shoulder. What are you doing? That in expressing your sympathy or empathy or sharing with the grief of a patient, you use your non-verbal functions like touching the patient or in your body language. If there is humility, if there is also in your eyes the grief that you are experiencing at the loss of your patient, all this will be conveyed to the patient. So non-verbal functions can complement, they can reinforce, and sometimes actually contradict. And they're omnipresent. Like you may be speaking, you may be very, very good at speaking, you may have the best vocabulary in the whole world, and yet if the non-verbal cues are not in consonance with what you are saying, it will take away from the efficacy of the communication. A small example, I would say, so it is omnipresent, it cuts across language barriers. Like a person crying, you know that even if the person doesn't say anything, you can react to it. But sometimes it may be ambiguous. Like I remember many a morning rounds where nodding the head sideways or from up down, we get confused whether it is a no or a yes. So non-verbal, the disadvantage is that it can sometimes be uh, ambiguous. And as I said, if you are on a digital platform, it may uh, lose its efficacy because you are not able to read these non-verbal cues. The importance is that in any communication, actually, the verbal part is taking only 35% in terms of the efficacy. Rest of the effect or impact is coming from the non-verbal clues. So you can see that the little child is just asking her father, Daddy, look what I made. And he says, keep on talking, I'm listening. You know that this communication here, the words do not mean anything. And the non-verbal is all important. And because the non-verbal is so important, that is why we are trying to do this, that we are trying to put the non-verbal in our verbal. Now, you send a WhatsApp message to someone like miles away, and these tiny emojis, what are you trying to do? You're trying to express an emotion like a non-verbal one, but in a verbal manner of writing. So, with this small background of communication in general, when we say communication in healthcare, and this because you're going to learn about many aspects of communication, the scientific, the written, the thesis, and so many in the other topics. Some people have defined communication in healthcare as the ability of the provider, that is the healthcare personnel, to elicit and understand patient concerns and to explain healthcare issues, to engage in shared decision making if desired. So, if you understand that it is the onus is on us to elicit and understand the concerns, the patient concerns, as they relate to, say, the diagnosis or prognosis or treatment. I will come to these, I'll break it down for you in the next few slides, and to explain so that we engage in this shared process. Both of us are partners in this decision making, because after all, like I as a surgeon or someone else as a physician, what are we doing? We are giving them options. This is what's available, helping them to make decisions that are optimum or best in their given circumstances. So unless we understand those circumstances and concerns, how will we help? So what is the message that we usually give? What do our communications consist of? So like when we are in the outpatient clinic, we are talking about the diagnoses, we are talking about their prognosis, we are talking about management options, treatment plans, the risk benefit. I hope that we are talking about all these, because when a patient comes to the hospital, believe me, for most patients, hospitals are very scary places. And not only just because they are sick and they know that the sickness is going to take toll in terms of physical and mental problems, but also because it is going to be a financial burden. They do not know anything about the physical, the geography of the hospital. Getting from one place to another is difficult. So many things are there. So all of this, one can imagine, see, when a patient's treatment is to start, all these things are important, the diagnosis, prognosis, everything. But how to communicate these to the patients in a manner that they're neither overwhelmed by it in such a way that they don't understand, nor are we keeping information from them. Because unless we give them the full information while taking into consideration their social, physical, financial, all kinds of contexts, we cannot give them the information which they need to be able to make the correct decision. And the thing is that this communication is not a one time thing. We will have to interact with patients at multiple times, sometimes give the same information many, many times over till it is clear that they understand. And at any one meeting, one aspect of the communication or one part of the message may take precedence. For example, when you are talking to the patient in a ward round, then it is the day to day progress of the patient, which we talk about most. If you're talking on the day prior to surgery, maybe you're talking more about the risks of the operative procedure or the process of consent. So it is not that the entire message has to be given at one time by one person. No, but these are the components of the messages that is exchanged between the healthcare worker and the patient and the caregiver. Like, for example, yes, it is important that the diagnosis and prognosis is known to the patient, but at all points of time, we also have to take into consideration the cost of treatment. And sometimes, if these don't match with what we can provide at our institute, what are the options that we can give to them? So, all those things are also equally important. And where and when, as I said, the nature of our communication with the patient changes from day to day also. Like as I said, the communications held in the outpatient clinic are different from those in the ward, are different from those in the OR. Say, for example, something happens suddenly in the OR, how you are going to communicate with the patient at that time is different from the general ward round or a patient in the ICU. And as many of you raise these questions, there are special times like emergency interventions, unanticipated deterioration, death, financial concerns suddenly crop up, or sometimes patient complaints. So these are all special circumstances. And actually, what I would say is that we finish our medical education, post graduation, and even our postdoctoral this thing without someone ever talking to us about these things. Like when a resident just now asked about how to talk to a patient when a patient dies, how to talk to the family. And I know that as a junior resident in general surgery, and somehow these things always happen in the middle of the night, one patient died and I was terrified, not even though it was like an expected death, as Dr. Kapoor said, because this was the first time I was kind of certifying a patient as dead. I think I checked some 10, 20 times and did not tell the family till after about 1 hour because I was scared, the patient would just get up and my certifying him as dead would be wrong. So, you know, we throughout our MBBS or MS or even like just nobody really talks to us about these things and how important they are, and we are not trained. We're supposed to learn on the job, and that is why I always feel very happy when Dr. Punita, organizes these 01 courses on communication. That at least we start talking about the importance. How suddenly the most junior person in the team who has no experience of even death should not be the person talking to the family about a patient's death. Similarly, unanticipated deterioration, which might require an emergency intervention. So now I think in the West, because their healthcare processes are now more tuned to this, hospitals have very much, like organized and written policies about how this has to be done. The staff is trained in it and they know how to go about it. so that, it is always usually because of these special times like sudden deaths, unanticipated deteriorations, or emergency interventions that difficult conversations need to be had with the patient and the family. And these are also the times when things can go wrong, and from the patient's point of view and from the hospital point of view, because of the sword of litigation which always hangs.
दोनों brother भाग
Oh,
दोनों चलेंगे dear
sorry again, someone's mic is not muted. So basically now, when we say communication with patient and caregivers, somehow we are presuming that it is just the doctors. But that's not so. Ideally speaking, actually the communication with the patient starts from the time that the patient enters the hospital. So the staff at the reception counter, the nursing staff, which are in contact, patient contact, so much more than, say, a attending or a consultant, the residents in training, the consultants, technicians in the lab, or in radiology or anesthesia, even the ward attendants and the sanitary staff. Basically, all people who are going to come in contact with the patient should have some basic understanding of what communication with the patient at whatever level they are. Obviously, the nurse probably doesn't have to talk about the prognosis or the diagnosis, but she can talk about the medications which the patient is receiving, or if she's giving an injection or a feed, or she's putting a Ryle's tube. The communication can be in relation to that. However, unless we understand that communication is a responsibility of everyone in the healthcare team who is coming in contact with the patient, it will never become important from the hospital point of view, and it will never become something to which our leadership is committed. And this is something which cannot be done only at the individual level. Now, the fundamental question is, why should we have this? Why this emphasis on communication with the patient and the family? The fundamental thing, as I understand, is this communication is so that we can establish a rapport and a trust with the patient and the caregivers, so that they become our partners and not adversaries. See, we are in a profession which we can call as a very high risk profession. Things will go wrong, not because we are not careful enough or whatever. It is in the nature of the things that we do. And if something goes wrong, if the patients feel that the doctor and the patient are on the same side, believe me, the journey becomes much more easy for the patient as well as the doctor. Dr. Kapoor said, I think all of you may have noticed, he said that many patients who actually died, their families still have a good relationship with him. It is not that the complication happened, but it was how the treating team was with the patient and the family at the time that it happened. So, establishing this relationship of trust where the patient feels that the treating team and the patient are on the same side. The disease is on the other side, the complication is on the other side, but they are together as a team. And believe me, even though we say that the world has changed a lot, there is a lot of mistrust, it is still important. It is still important, or rather, I would say it is even more important. It is even more important that we have this trust between the patient and the doctor. See, why does it, if there is good communication, if there is effective communication, patients find it easier, if they understand what the treatment is going to be, it is easy for them to adhere to their treatment plan. If they have not understood what is going to happen, then how do we expect them to adhere to a plan? Also, they will have more realistic expectations. See, this happens all the time in the outpatient clinic, and I think all of you would have experienced this, that you talk to a patient, this is the first time you're having a conversation, it's a malignancy, it is an advanced malignancy, and one of the family members will say, Doctor, kis stage mein hai? And you will think that they probably know about stages, and you'll say, हमारे हिसाब से अभी stage 4 में है, they'll say, oh, बच तो जाएंगे ना लेकिन. See, the thing is that that is why, as I said in the beginning, communications will have to be about the same thing also. We may have to do it multiple times, because only when they understand will it happen that their expectations will be realistic. And if during this journey they have received information, education, and emotional support from the treating team, the overall experience for them will be a positive one, even though things may not have always been very smooth. And this happens, all the time. Like if 40% of my practice is with malignancy, things are not always going to be, or even with benign conditions, we know that things are not always going to go the way the patients expect. So if the communication is right from the beginning, it is a continuous process, it is a documented process, then for the patient, it will be not only for the patient will it be a positive experience, but also, see, for us, why is it important that this communication is always effective is, see, now we know that actually most of the adverse events which happen in patient care are not because the doctor didn't or not understand, or the nurse did not understand, or the doctor was not competent, or they did not have the effective tools, but because of breaches in communication. So having good communication actually is going to reduce the harm to patients which comes from many of these preventable adverse events. And I think many of you would be attending the patient safety course also, and there we will readdress the role of communication in reducing the adverse events which the patients face in their journey in the hospital. So basically, actually, a good communication with patient and the patient care is at the very core of providing high quality patient centered care. And this reduced risk of litigation that I'm saying, believe me, like we in the Department of Surgical Gastroenterology, we get a lot of patients who suffer a bile duct injury after what is considered quite a simple procedure in surgery, that is a cholecystectomy. And I do not know how many times I've heard this from the patients. They'll say, Doctor साहब, हमारे को तो नली तो कट गई, लेकिन दुख इस बात का है डॉक्टर साहब ने हमको बताया नहीं. And I think Dr. Kapoor will second me on this, that hundreds of times we have heard this. They were not told that things went wrong. They were not given the proper advice after things went wrong. And that is why the patients feel like, I have a very young patient who was admitted after a bile duct injury, admitted several times for the initial sepsis control, ultimately had a reconstructive surgery and is doing well. And once he was well, during the follow-up OPD visits, she's telling me, लेकिन एक बार उस डॉक्टर को सू करने का मन जरूर करता है, बताया ही नहीं हमको. So what I'm saying is that, as Dr. Kapoor also said, continued and maintained communication, not only from the patient's point of view, but also from the provider's point of view, definitely reduces the liability risk. And as I said, now there are several studies which have shown that communication among healthcare professionals is one of the leading causes of medical errors and patient harm in all kinds of patient care settings, ambulatory settings, emergency settings, inpatients, wherever. And Dr. Kapoor gave the example of the pilots having the talk about COVID. Believe me, when in surgery also, when they have seen that the root causes of wrong side surgery did not have much to do with the procedural compliance or organization culture, but this was a breach in communication. So that is why, as a healthcare service provider, we have to understand that if we want to have higher patient satisfaction, improved adherence to treatments, and Also, see reduction in the psychological effects. These days, you people must be reading a lot about how in this COVID era, even in like non-COVID patients or in the general population also, there is so much of depression, so much of anxiety, people with non-COVID illnesses not getting healthcare, access to healthcare. There are so many things, but if a communication is maintained between the providers and the patients, it at least reduces, it mitigates, and patients have this confidence, like when that they can kind of go over this difficult period with the help of the doctors. So it reduces symptoms and improves the quality of life and increases survival rate. So, but how to do it? We know communication is important not only for the patient but also for the healthcare providers. How to do it? I feel that the fundamental thing, if the communication has to improve, is acknowledge that it is important, and acknowledge that it's important to learn how to be better at it. You know, like I'll tell you, it's only after we are on our own, after we finish our training, that we go either in the academic, like in the government sector or the private sector. I'm in a government sector, and I can tell you there is a little bit of complacency in government doctors, and also a little bit of arrogance that we are not charging the patient. Patient is not paying us, and somehow that kind of makes us entitled, about not giving full information, not being involved so much in the consent process, not telling them everything, or maybe we rely that other components of the system will take care of it. When you are in the private and on your own, believe me, I think in terms of having written protocols or written procedures or being very careful about the consent process, uh, in the private, this thing you have to be even more so. But I think being in a government institute doesn't absolve us of this responsibility. Another important thing which I feel is important if communication will become important is that we acknowledge how our fundamental beliefs about what is the nature of our relationship with patients affects communication. And what do I mean by this? See, I feel that medicine is still very patriarchal. Patriarchal meaning in the sense that we somehow feel we are doing good to the patient and we are in a higher position, even though it is a mutual thing in the sense whatever we are is because of what our patients have allowed us to learn while they were going through very miserable times in their lives. So it is not that we are givers and the patients are takers. It is not like that. But if it is so in our mind, believe me, our relationship in our minds will not be like an equal partnership. And that is detrimental not only to the patients, but also to us. A patient who is a partner, who feels he's a partner, will be will be good for you also. For example, if I say that a patient who knows about, say, a patient has come for surgery in my department, but the patient is very cognizant about the drugs that the cardiologist has prescribed or the nephrologist has prescribed, knows what he is allergic to, can ask me questions about कि डॉक्टर साहब आपने ये दवा लिखी है मैं इतनी सारी दवाइयाँ और ले रहा हूँ कुछ गड़बड़ तो नहीं होगी. He's helping me also. So I think fundamentally we have to realize that we and our patients are in it together, and communicating with them and establishing a relationship of trust with them allows us to be in a partnership. Now, I think Dr. Kapoor touched on a lot of these things. So, how do we have this relationship of trust? How do we have this rapport? Fundamental is treating patients with respect and common courtesies at all stages of their care process. In India, like, still, I think patients, they'll say Namaste, doctor. First time. Hardly ever have I seen that the doctor says Namaste or whatever way greeting. The patient greets. So, but this respect and courtesy, irrespective of, as Dr. Kapoor said, their station in life, their economic status, or whatever. When this relationship is being initiated, we have to start on the right foot. And that this begins with this. respecting patient modesty, dignity, cultural preferences, and confidentiality. I think it is extremely, extremely, extremely important. You know, even here, where we do talk of these things, there have been instances in patient complaints because the treating doctor did not take into consideration whether it was examination of a female, having another female attendant there and not explaining to the patient, or whatever. So, and being non-judgmental about it. The other day, I was wondering, like, I was so happy when Dr. Kapoor mentioned the gender sensitivity and the gender responsiveness. I was thinking that in all my life, somehow I have never had a transgender patient ever in life, which seems very funny to me. It's not that we don't have, but maybe they're so scared of coming to a big hospital like this and being treated. I don't know how. So basically, I think this respect that we are talking of goes, it is to the being of the patient, irrespective of where and who they are in any other circumstance. When they come to our table, they are patients, and all of them have to be treated in the same manner. Communicating using simple language, ensuring that the patient is able to understand. Believe me, in the OPD, sometimes I do not know whether to feel sad or to feel exasperated or frustrated. But in my department, it happens that the new patients, the resident, sees them, and on their next visit, they come to the consultant. Many a times when they come to me, I see that none of the things which were planned in the first visit have been done. I'll ask them, आपने हार्ट वाले डॉक्टर साहब को दिखाया, आपने डायबिटीज वाले डॉक्टर साहब को दिखाया, दिल से हमें पता ही नहीं. So I said, were you not given a consultation form? So they will run through their papers, and yes, there will be those consultation forms, because if I ask the resident will say, I wrote, see, there is proof. Yes. However, the patient has not understood. So for all practical purposes, those consultations are not there, and in between 1 week has passed. So it's a waste of the patient's time, the money that he has spent staying outside while all this time, and of course, no progress has happened in the decision making. So not only using simple language, but also ensuring that what you are telling the patient is being understood. Like, what Dr. Kapoor was saying about when you order, the waiter repeats back to you. So, ma'am, have you said this? So many times nowadays I tell a patient, मैंने क्या बोला आपको बताएं, क्या करके आना है आपको अगली बार, just to see कि the patient has understood. And how will this happen? This providing adequate time during each patient encounter. And I'm sure many of you must be thinking, अगर मेरे पास 40 patients आते तो मैं कैसे करूंगी? And that is valid. That is valid. But if we start, only when we start talking about this, can we go to the administrators and say, see, if you expect me to provide quality care, then I cannot see 100 patients in the OPD. It's not possible for human beings to provide quality care with, giving adequate time to the patients. Many a times it doesn't happen. Similarly, eliciting their concerns and attentive listening. Dr. Kapoor used this word, listening. Now, many a times and I'm sure you would have seen too, that the communication becomes like a one-sided thing. You're telling. You're speaking continuously because a whole big file of, stack of files is waiting and you have to rush to the next patient. So actually no communication is happening, right? And of course, expressing empathy, which was discussed at so much length. And collaborating on plans cannot happen if the first few steps have not happened at all. So how? Again, understanding the importance of non-verbal communication. Now these days, leave aside the patients. I've seen so many times in a group also, people are talking, but nobody is actually listening because everybody is on their own mobiles, either talking or scrolling. Only half the ear is there to, So, and there are frequent interruptions. There is no eye contact. And the tone of voice, if there is aggression, if there is anger, if there is shouting, believe me, even if it is not the patient, even between. May I request everyone to please switch their mics, keep their mics on. Like, many a times, on the, excuse me, does somebody have their mic on?
ಅದು ಫೀಸ್ ಇಂದ ನಂಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಡ ಆಂಟಿ, ಒಬ್ಬೊಬ್ರದ್ದು ಒಂದೊಂದ್ ರೇಟ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ನಿನಗೆ ಯಾವ್ದು ಸರಿ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ ಅವ್ರ ಹತ್ರ ಇದ್ ಮಾಡಿಸ್ಕೊ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ನಾನ್ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಏನು ಹೇಳಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ಅಲ್ಲ ನನಗ್ ಗೊತ್ತು ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ಫೀಸ್ ಒಬ್ಬೊಬ್ರದ್ದು ಒಂದೊಂದು ರೇಟ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ.
Punita? Okay. So
trying to switch off the mic.
Sorry. So it's not what I would say that.
Hello.
Hello. Speaking is not synonymous with communication, and silence is not the same as not communicating, and then there is everything in between. So I'm a crossword buff, and one of my favorite anagrams is listen and silent. Meaning, if you just change the position of the letters, listen is same as silence. So you can only listen when you are silent. All this time we were talking of how an individual can do this communication, but I think it is something that has to be done, like, because everything is so interconnected, it has to be done at the level of the organization, in the sense that ideally communication should be incorporated in the mandatory training programs. Like, you people are at least having this as part of your 01 course. So it should not only be for doctors, it should be for nurses, it should be for the paramedical staff, the MSWs who are working with us. It should become a part of training program for all the healthcare professionals. And so that communication becomes a part of the culture of the organization. It's not that you should be just taught how to write your thesis, but also this soft skill of having how to communicate well with your peers and with the patients and the families, not in not just limit communication to the scientific communications. And the organization can also have patient satisfaction surveys, so that we can have a feedback. I was shocked to know that to get an appointment, like in this just pre-COVID, people come to the OPD at 2 a.m. at night, because only some 10-15 people will get a appointment, and then if they are the 11th, they will come the next day again at 2 a.m. I'm sure in this era of technology we can do better than this. Why should patients have to line up at 2 a.m. from 2 a.m. at night to get an appointment? But how do we know this if the organization doesn't conduct any survey or doesn't ask the patients how their experience in the organization is being? We will never know, and therefore we will never improve. Similarly, meeting with the employees or meeting with the healthcare personnel, this has to be done at the level of the organization, so that better communication or effective communication can become the culture. So continuously soliciting feedback on patient satisfaction, addressing patient complaints promptly, and analyzing the trends in patient complaints so that corrective actions can be taken. All these things have to be done at the level of the organization. So I would say that I can end by saying that communication is one of the most important tools in providing quality patient care, in improving patient satisfaction, engaging patients in healthcare decisions, because once patients understand the health information and their treatment plans, they are better able to participate in the decision-making process, adhere to the recommendations, and manage their own health. And healthcare practices can commit to effective patient communication by fundamentally treating patients with respect and common courtesy at all stages of the care process, measuring the patient satisfaction, identify the gaps in communication, and implementing corrective actions. Thank you.